First of all, it's hard to get off of those armchairs, so almost get different ones. It's very difficult to go from sitting there to standing up. I'm going to try to do what Mark Twain wrote to his friend, forgive me for not having time to write you a brief letter. So now I would like to start by sharing with you several thoughts that challenge me as well. I received, in preparation for the conference, I came to the conference in an attempt to extract some thoughts from my mind, so allow me to begin with some preliminary ideas about the paper that was published and the reality as I see it. I will begin by saying that what we have what the common ground between all of the initiatives for peace and negotiations is the dilemma that I cannot see how we can extract ourselves from using the existing tools. There is the fact that we are not willing to see ourselves as a victim on the one hand, and on the other hand, the inability to be conquerors. And this is a dilemma because as much as I would like to stop being a conqueror and to stop the occupation, to end the occupation, I see myself as a victim, and it increases the numbers of victims. And the more victims there are, the less motivated I am to end the occupation. I think this is a shared problem. This has been a problem since the Oslo Accord, and nothing has changed since then. There are practical implications to this dilemma. One is the perspective of time, which means that what the State of Israel defines as a solution, as a temporary solution, is seen as by the Palestinian people as a permanent solution. And from the wider perspective, anything that the maximum that the State of Israel will be willing to concede under any government, by the way, from until further notice, does not correspond to the minimum that the Palestinians demand. Now, there are two trends that have dealt with this dilemma. One is optimal, I would say, but only in a single direction. One solution is the overlap between the homeland and a state, meaning that the State of Israel, that Israel will control all of its territory. There will be no more occupation and no more victims, no more threats. But then the price would be that the Palestinians will not receive what they want, and they will be part of the dilemma, and the reality will be horrible. The second solution is a state of all of its citizens throughout the territories of the State of Israel. We can call it the extended Palestine. This will solve the Palestinian problem. There are no victims, no occupation, but there are Jews who will refuse to such a solution. So the solution is that those are ideal, optimal solutions, but completely impractical. If we consider the realistic, practical solution that the paper published by the team has written, which is almost a mantra of the mainstream, of the intellectual mainstream in the State of Israel, is two states for two nations based on separation and partition, based on the borders, on a constitution, and a legal and a conceded border. What is the problem with this option, with this proposal? I doubt that this proposal, as it begins to develop, that it will receive the confidence that will reduce the lack of confidence between the two sides as we aspire to reach this solution. Because the threats on our land will not disappear overnight. The solution of two states removes the issue of occupation, but leaves the unsolved problem of the lack of confidence between the two sides, leaving both sides feeling like that they are being victimized. So what do we have in common? They disagree over two pairs of concepts. There's the concept of partition and the concept of boundaries. The concept, I repeat, border boundaries and both are involved, but in the opposite directions. For the comprehensive solution, of a single Jewish country eliminates the issue of boundary and partition. For the solution of two states for two nations, it is exactly the reverse. It accepts the issue of partition and accepts boundaries. The problem is that both of these solutions do not resolve the problem that I described before. But now I would like to share with you my thoughts with you. What I would like to do is to connect the two solutions which seems to be a connection that seems to be impossible. I would like to take the lack of a partition of the first solution, in which we would, meaning the partition of the second solution, and the lack of boundaries in the first. Is that clear? Was I clear up until now? I would like to combine two different possibilities that don't work together. The first solution of a complete Jewish state or a complete Palestinian state. I would like to take the idea of the lack of boundaries and combined it. I would like to take the idea presented by Anat Kortz and Gilad Sher's team. I would like to preserve the idea of partition, meaning partition as proposed by the INSS, and the lack of boundaries from the perspective of the homeland. I would like to connect two ideas that seemingly do not coexist. And I would like to propose that we try to eliminate the connection, the affinity between boundaries as an objective or as a solution. The way I see it, the boundary is not the objective. The boundaries should bring us to a stable solution, stable and sustainable resolution. Therefore, the borders and boundaries are only a means. The borders that I picture is not firm, is not rigid and formal as exists today in the discourse on the topic. I want to present the option of a soft border, not a rigid border. A soft border has several characteristics, and that is the last portion of my lecture. The first characteristic that I indicated is that the border is not the objective of the negotiations. It is a means for reaching a stable solution. This stability does not coincide with the common approach in existing literature and in practical thought of problem solving. This approach, such as this, is based upon symmetric incentives to both sides, without considering how critical each issue is for each side. On the other hand, what I call process-oriented solution is a solution. It is a solution that is guided by processes, that is based on differential asymmetric incentives for each side, based on the criticalness of the issue for each. What does that mean? And I will conclude with this. The soft border that I propose, the breathing border, there is no overlap between equal recipients within the critical areas. On the one hand, we will receive quite a bit, and one side will contribute more in one area, and the other side will contribute more in the other. A flexible border will require canceling any preconditions for negotiations. All unilateral territorial concessions. This is the process-oriented solution in which preconditions are seen as serving final conclusive objectives. I propose that based on this problem-solving solution, we will not use a border which is at the root of typical conventional problem solving, but rather consider the fact that there are many other possible solutions. That is what I wanted to say this time. I would like to propose that we abandon the idea of the rigid boundary and consider the option of a soft boundary and connect the idea of no boundaries and partition.
Thank you very much, Professor Mishal.